Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes. Today we're going to be looking at something a little bit different, in that usually I break out a ship and tell you all about how something in EVE Echoes works. Today though we're going to be looking at things that aren't yet in EVE Echoes and how they work, I guess. Although admittedly this is based a lot on how things operate in EVE Online. Now bear with me, there is a good reason for this. That's ultimately, some of you guys have come up to me and asked, hey Benzie, I've seen the Bellicose and the Vigil, or the Blackbird and the Griffin, the Celestis and the Maulus, the Arbiter and the Crucifier, and they have some really weird bonuses on them for some stuff that I can't seem to find in-game. What's that all about? So today, we're going to be looking at electronic warfare, or EWAR, and how this is in EVE Online, and how we expect that this will come to EVE Echoes. And we're going to do that by looking at the 4 frigates that I mentioned, the Griffin, the Maulus, the Crucifier, and the Vigil. Now if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell so that you never miss a video, and of course let me know what topics you want to see me cover in future videos. Finally, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon. Details on screen now. Alright, that said and done, let's talk about all the different types there are of EWAR. Now the first EWAR module that we're going to talk about here are electronic jammers. Now electronic jammers, also known as ECM or electronic countermeasures, are predominantly found on Caldari ships. Now in Echoes they're found on both the Griffin frigate and the Blackbird cruiser. If we look at the trait description here for the Griffin, for example, you can see electronic warfare bonus per level, plus 5% to both electronic jammer strength and electronic jammer optimal range. So what are electronic jammers? Well, ultimately, obviously we only have EVE Online to go on here, but there's no reason to believe that they'll be any different at all once they hit Echoes. Basically what electronic jammers do is they target a ship and hopefully cause that target to unlock and then be unable to relock onto targets whilst they're active. Now there is a chance of this happening. Think of these kind of like energy neutralizers. They've got that optimal range and they've got an accuracy fall off. And the closer they are to optimal, the more likely they are to actually successfully jam a target, causing it to unlock and be unable to relock for the duration of that activation cycle. Obviously, therefore, the higher the jammer strength, the more likely that is to actually apply that effect. These are found, as I said, mainly here on the Griffin and on the Blackbird. They're incredibly useful ships. Great if you've got something like a stealth bomber. Obviously, you can't recloak a stealth bomber if someone's locked onto you. But if you have an electronic jammer nearby that can whack them, cause that ship to lose all of its locks, you then can reactivate your cloak and jump away. Or just anyone. Heck, if they've got a warp disruptor on you, you can cause them to lose that lock, and thus all of their targeting systems fail, and you can warp away freely. That's the power of the electronic jammer, ECM, electronic countermeasures. And that brings us nicely to our second type of EWAR module, known as a Sensor Dampener, or DAMPs. These are predominantly found on Galente ships, in Echoes notably the Maulus frigate and the Celestis cruiser. Now these, again, if we go in trait description here, you can see electronic warfare bonus, plus 5% sensor damper strength, plus 5% sensor damper optimal range. Similar here to the electronic jammers, but kind of the other way around. Whereas a jammer has a chance to drop the lock and make it impossible to relock until that activation cycle has completed, what damps do is they slow down the lock and reduce the range from which a ship can lock. So the higher the strength, the slower the target ship locks onto things. Very useful for if a ship needs to realign and to lock onto a new target, for example, hitting it with dampeners can make that take an awful long time. In some cases in EVE Online, there are stories of literally enough dampeners being put onto a ship that it takes several minutes to be able to lock onto a target, which is just insane, especially if you then imagine the hilarity of finally the ship locks onto what it wants, and then an ECM hits and boof, the lock drops. Electronic dampeners are a bit more situational in EVE Online, certainly, but not without their uses. Great in fleet warfare, just for making it really difficult for your enemy to actually adapt and react to a change in circumstance. Therefore, once they've locked onto something and you've got the dampeners in place, they pretty much have to stay on that target, even if a better one approaches, at which point you bring your second wave in and have great fun against their fleet, because they can't bear to unlock knowing that they're never going to lock onto anything else. The third type of EWAR module I want to talk about today are weapon disruptors. These are slightly more intricate than the other two, but we'll go over that in just a moment, and they're found predominantly on EWAR ships, in the case of EVE Echoes on the Crucifier frigate and the Arbitrator cruiser. If you have a look here at the Crucifier, electronic warfare bonus plus per level, plus 5% weapon disruptor strength, plus 5% weapon disruptor optimal range. These are designed to screw with your opponent's weapons, and obviously the closer they have an optimal range and an accuracy fall off, and the closer you are to optimal with a weapon disruptor, the more pronounced the effect. They come in two different types. First of all, you have tracking disruptors, which, as the name would suggest, screws with your opponent's turrets. It reduces their optimal range, it reduces their accuracy fall-off, and it reduces their tracking speed. It just means that under the effect of a tracking disruptor, a turret is far, far worse and is really going to struggle to actually hit anything that it's pointed at. Secondly, then you can also get guidance disruptors. These are the second type of weapon disruptor. Now, as the name might indicate, guidance disruptors are, of course, targeting missile ships. It reduces the range of missiles by reducing their flight velocity and increases their explosion radius while decreasing their explosion velocity. Kind of the same effect as the tracking disruptor. It makes the missiles shorter range and it makes them do less damage. They don't apply as well to their target because of those negative bonuses. Weapon disruptors are a little bit more varied, but you do obviously need to fit for whichever one you're going for. There's no point putting a guidance disruptor on a Thrasher that's been fitted with cannons, for example, and if a Caracal turns up, then your tracking disruptor isn't going to do anything against its missiles. At least, again, that's based on EVE Online. For all we know, in EVE Echoes, it might end up being just a weapon disruptor. Not the two types, just a weapon disruptor, and it works on both missiles and on turret ships. Personally, I think if that ends up being the case, that's going to be a bit overpowered, and I do hope that it's kind of like, you know how if you're training into missile skills, they affect both torpedoes and missiles, and rapids. I'm kind of hoping it's the same thing here, that obviously anything that gives you a bonus to weapon disruptor will affect the tracking disruptors and the guidance disruptors. As I said, I just hope it's not one module. One module to me just makes it a little bit too powerful compared to the others, and everyone is ultimately just going to want to run weapon disruptors. The fourth and final type of EWAR module that I want to talk about today then are target painters. These are found mainly on Minmatar ships, notably in EVE Echoes, the Vigil frigate and the Bellicose cruiser. If we look at the trait description here, on the Vigil, electronic warfare bonus, plus 5% target painter effects, plus 5% target painter optimal range. Now, these are slightly unusual compared to the other EWAR modules. Whereas the other EWAR modules only affect the one ship and reduce its abilities, what this does is boost the abilities of every one of your ships. Ultimately, a target painter makes the enemy's ship signature radius even bigger. Now, obviously, in the case here of the Vigil, that plus 5% target painter target effect will increase the bonus even more. Like with micro warp drives, an active micro warp drive might increase your signature radius by 430%, whereas a different meta level one might increase it by 460%. You'll get that with target painters, and in the case of the Vigil, whichever target painter you have fitted will actually have a bigger effect. Obviously, the bigger an enemy's signature radius is, the quicker you can lock onto them, and the more damage you'll do against them, the easier they are to hit, all that kind of thing. So whereas ECM, damps, and weapon disruptors ultimately make the target ship worse, this makes your entire fleet better against that one ship, which makes these great fun in fleet engagements. You can pick a target, and everyone who's firing at that target just gets those massive bonuses, and it can be absolutely devastating. Finally then, we come to the question of when might these actually get added to EVE Echoes. So here we are on the EVE Echoes Trello page. I do apologise for my battery life, yes, it's giving me conniptions too, but let's just get on with it. 2020 November, this is just an anticipated time, it's an expected time. Things happen. Stuff happens. 2020 has been a year of absolute nightmares for everyone. It could be delayed. So if November comes along and this miraculous patch doesn't surface, don't come back and yell at me. Don't yell at the devs. Understand that delays do happen, especially in 2020. But anyway, let's have a look. 2020 November, what are they suggesting might be added to the game? Send Omega as a gift to your friend. Huzzah, that'll be nice. General balance adjustment, I assume changing some of the ship bonuses, weapon stats, that kind of thing. That'll be quite nice. I'm hoping drones get looked at there. New Pirates mechanic, dynamic pirate fleets. All anomalies will use the new dynamic pirate fleets. No, I don't know what that means. Yes, I do want to know. encounter balance adjustment, encounter missions will use the new dynamic pirate fleets, and new mission in the encounter delivery mission remake. So we'll be getting new missions in the encounter system, including a revision of how the delivery missions work. Interesting. But here we are then. New module, remote sensor dampeners, new module, target painters. We've also got warp scramblers and interdiction spheres there. Notably, that doesn't mention the electronic jammers or the weapon disruptors, but I do have a sneaky suspicion that those might also be in there. To me, it makes no sense to have the sensor dampeners and the target painters whilst not having the ECM and the weapon disruptors. I mean, it doesn't actually show those under any of the other dates, under future or under 2020 December. There's a lot there to unpack for a future video as well. But it doesn't suggest anywhere about those ECM or the weapon disruptors, so I would hope they'll be in there with remote sensor damps and target painters. Fingers crossed. Can't guarantee it, fingers crossed. It's worth pointing as well here that we do also get warp scramblers and interdiction spheres on the list. I don't want to go too much into these in this particular video, but since we're on the subject of cool new electronic warfare that may be arriving in November, warp scramblers are essentially warp disruptors, but at a shorter range and a higher strength. So whereas a warp disruptor might be anywhere between 1 or 2 strength at a range of 20 to 26 kilometers, a warp scrambler will be 2 to 4 strength, for example, at say a 7 to 10 kilometer radius. Warp scramblers also notably turn off micro warp drives. You cannot activate a micro warp drive when under the effects of a warp scrambler. Again, based on EVE Online. Now, I know that warp disruptors say that they switch off micro warp drives. They don't. We've tested this. It doesn't work. It's only warp scramblers that turn off micro warp drives. Finally then, at the bottom, interdiction spheres. These are the bubbles that people talk about in nullsec that give them nightmares. If you're having trouble with gate camps in nullsec at the moment, wait until interdiction spheres become a thing. These are big bubbles that just switch off your warp engine. If you're trying to warp through one of them, it will pull you out of warp. If you're inside one of them or just touching the edge of it, you cannot activate your warp drive. Yes, you can micro warp drive out of there, and that's strongly recommended because where there's an interdiction sphere, there's a fleet of people waiting to shoot you, but ultimately you cannot activate warp drives, which makes them excellent for system defense, and that'll be a big part of the sovereignty update when that hits. So yes, November. Looks like we'll be getting remote sensor dampeners and target painters in November. Hopefully we'll be getting ECM and weapon disruptors then too, but that remains to be seen. It might be so far out it's not even on this list, at which point I kind of feel sorry for those Amar and Caldari pilots, myself actually included, because I do really enjoy weapon disruptors. Those are great fun, just screwing with someone's weapon systems. Anyway folks, those are just my thoughts and my opinions. Obviously this is based on knowledge from EVE Online. Things might be different in EVE Echoes when these modules actually arrive. I'm just giving my thoughts and my opinions based on what I know from EVE Online. It all could be different, so please don't come back here in 3 months' time and shoot the messenger. I'm just giving some thoughts and opinions, so let me know yours in the comment section down below. Have you tried flying one of these ships, like the Bellicose or the Griffin or whatever, even though you don't have those EWAR modules equipped? How are you finding them? Are they interesting ships in other ways? Are you enjoying flying them? Have you got any interesting kills or stories about that? Did you used to fly EWAR of any kind in EVE Online, and how do you reckon that's going to be applied to EVE Echoes? Do you agree with me that the weapon disruptors should be both separate modules, or do you think that actually weapon disruptors would be fine if they were joined into just one type of module? Let me know in the comment section down below, let me know your thoughts. Love chatting with you guys. Otherwise folks, thanks for watching, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.